versus a California style per se. I mean, okay, weather based and all that, yeah. But I mean, it can't basically one style be copied and immediately seen throughout the nation once something is seen as cool, right? You know, it doesn't take very long. And so that's why you actually have people wearing the gangsta look in Rancho Bernardo. You know, here to represent the OB, you know, my hood, you know. But so, and this idea of inventions that homogenize culture, and so anything that increases that, and the fashion industry was one of those. The creation of the fashion industry homogenized culture. Now, if that was, you know, one of the outcomes or the effects of the sewing machine, then let's take a look at something that also seems innocuous at first, but may have also a very interesting view, which is the typewriter. Christopher Sholes invented the typewriter, and by the way, normally I have an antique typewriter that's normally in my office. It's a family piece. Because we moved offices, I haven't brought it back up. I don't know if you all can see, but if you look right there through those glass windows, you see those glass cases. The business department actually has a display of historic typewriters there from early 1900s onwards, and they're really cool. If you get a chance, take a look at them. It's very cool piece. What's the importance of the typewriter?
Right?
Well, yeah. What?
That's production.
Okay, if you think about it this way, yeah. Before, we consider printed documents to be professional, right? But if you wanted a printed document, what did you have to do if you were a business and wanted to print a document before the typewriter?
You had to print it up.
Yeah, you had to go to the press, right? You had to have it typeset and all this and all that. The typewriter created a printing press on your desk, okay? So in a very simple way, it was a way to very quickly professionalize documents in a way, since we put value on typeset documents as a way of literally putting a typesetting device on your desktop. Cool. But there's a social effect. And the typewriter will be part of a series of devices and a series of movements that will be part of genderizing the workplace. And that's another thing we're going to talk about, genderizing the workplace. And as we said, if the sewing machine is true, that sewing machine was one of multiple devices and multiple things where women are beginning to work outside the home. Women working outside the home also created a societal challenge. Because as we said before, when women worked inside the home, what did they not get? Pay. They didn't get money, they didn't get to shop, they didn't get to do all sorts of things. And so women were, it's like, women working? No! You know, it's not possible. You know, they can't make money. That's not right, you know. They biologically are incapable of handling such a thing, you know, bullshit like that. In the same sort of way that we have this idea that women were unsuitable for that, it created a culture shock, particularly for guys. Because on the one hand, women are working and making money contributing to the household income, but that somehow suggests that maybe women should be more equal. Can't have that, right? Okay, because that would challenge societal norms about the proper role of men and women, right? And so how does that work? Well, we begin to genderize the workplace. We begin to find ways to split the workplace into men's jobs and women's jobs. That's part of the reason why I was joking about men's and women's machines, is that I was trying to lead into this genderization conversation. Consider, before the typewriter, if you think about, go back to the Charles Dickens classic, A Christmas Carol, okay? Ebenezer Scrooge has his assistant named, what's his assistant who works for him? Bob Cratchit, right? You know, played by Kermit the Frog in the Muppet version. Or Mickey Mouse in the Mickey Mouse version, or whatever, okay? So Bob Cratchit is working for Scrooge. What does Bob Cratchit do? What's his job? Okay, yeah, he's what's called the clerk, or if you're in England, Clark, because they have weird vowel problems, irritable vowel syndrome, I call it. But the clerk of Clark did one, he's kind of like a secretary in that he would write letters and copy letters, but what did the clerk also do? Yeah, kind of like, you know, numbers and finance and all that sort of stuff. Well, notice what happens with a typewriter. and the typewriter is the cause of it, but it's part of what we're seeing is splitting it. Now you actually see that job of the clerk or clerk splitting into two jobs. On the one hand, you have the bookkeeper or accountant, which is the man's job, right? And that job is better qualified, it's more educated, and it pays more prestigious. And then there's the what? The secretary, which is the women's job that is lower qualified, lower paid, and you see how that works. And we see that there's that split between, and we see it, there in. Oh yeah.
Older movies, you have like the boss and then just the secretary.
Right, exactly, and not just an older. I mean, you just think about the way that we think of all sorts of things. I mean, in the law, you had the lawyer and the judge are all male, right? And then the court reporter, the stenographer, is female, right? It's a generalization of work. There was this riddle that was said when I was a kid, and it was a real stumper. And this is not a joke. This was and only if you're old enough would you recognize it. You may recognize this as a riddle that was said. But the riddle went along these lines. A boy is in the car with his father, and they're driving to school. And along the way to school, another car runs a red light, T-bones the car, it instantaneously kills the father, and the son is in critical condition. An ambulance comes and rushes the boy to the emergency room. In the emergency room, it's immediately diagnosed that if he does not have immediate surgery, the boy will die from internal bleeding. And so they immediately prep him and take him into the OR. The surgeon comes down and is prepping, turns around, and in horror gasps, "I can't work on this child. This boy is my son." How is that possible? Yeah, duh, the mom's a surgeon. Or, okay, nowadays you could also say he has two dads. Both are possible, okay. But I mean, the thing was, at the time, the idea that actually it was a real stumper. People were like, clone, I mean, people really, the idea, the simple solution that the woman could be a doctor was so weird because, of course, a doctor was a male job and the female job was the nurse. Even today, still, more women are represented in nursing than men are. But people try and say, look, it's not a genderized thing, but still, people have a tendency to mentally genderize that job, right? And so it's interesting. Sometimes, and what's been interesting is that the higher paid jobs have become less genderized, but the lower paid jobs still remain, quote unquote, stigmatized as being the female jobs when they're lesser paid and all that. And it's still a societal norm that we have. Secretary still to us still sounds female to the ear in a way that it shouldn't.
Wasn't the whole kind of like the female being nurse thing, wasn't that a lot of it kind of born out of war though? A lot of the men went off to war, so what did they do? They became nurses.
Why wouldn't they be doctors?
I don't know.
Because actually, we see that they're not born out of war because in reality, healthcare professionals, healthcare professionals when they were actually in the United States in the 18th century, midwives were actually sometimes better healers than quote unquote doctors who didn't necessarily always have a degree. And we're talking about actually professionalization of medicine when we get to, there's another section when we get to the whole generalization thing. But it's a good idea, it's an interesting one, but I don't think the evidence would bear that out, that war itself is a creation of nerve. Now, it is true.
But more of a booster, really.
Well, I mean, certainly, I mean, the British woman Florence Nightingale is going to professionalize nursing as a female occupation as being seen as there, but I mean, there was already this idea that women could be doctors, but on the battlefield, there's already male doctors. The generalization already existed. There's medics, right, and then female nurses is a separate category, but the war didn't create that category. But nursing obviously did come out of war in the sense of Nightingale's professionalization of nursing. So that part is true. But
they wouldn't even let women in medical schools.
Yeah, no. Even if your name was Doctor Quentin. So there we go. Now, if the typewriter led to the genderization of the workplace.